Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you've had a great day today with all the fine panelists and sessions that you've attended so far. My name is Reeb. I teach entrepreneurship. I'm the program director for Entrepreneurial Studies and Business Studies. And I welcome everyone. What I'd like to do first is introduce our fine panelists here. We're going to talk about atychiphobia. That's the name for a fear of failure. They put a name to it. And we're going to give some insights and experiences that I think you'll find helpful. So let me start with my friend Janet Kolodzy, professor and chair of journalism. Janet, you want to talk about yourself briefly?
Sure. I've been chair and at Emerson I've been chair for the last 4 years, been teaching journalism, but previously I had over 2 decades worth of opportunity to constantly try to do better in journalism. That was a daily task. So I like to say, like Elizabeth Barrett Browning, how do I love thee? Could I fail in journalism? We'll count the ways.
Well, you and I will count our ways, and I think I have more than you in terms of the failure. So I too was a journalist before being an entrepreneur and then becoming a teacher. So next, Dion Hawkins. Hello, Dion.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Luann, for the introduction. Hello to everyone. I'm so glad that you are all able to make it, especially considering we are all on Zoom so much. So I know that this is an active commitment. So thank you for being here. And I'm sure I speak for the rest of the panelists when I say that. I'll keep it brief. My name is Dion Hawkins. I am an assistant professor of argumentation and advocacy at Emerson College. And I also run our college's speech and debate team. And I will be giving insights to you all today, kind of from that perspective, being a collegiate debate coach, as well as going through competition, as well as implications and insights from my critical race trainings and consultings when I do race equity and things like that. So I'm really excited to talk about this. I think this is a thing that's unique to Emerson, and that we are very creative in what we do, and we kind of expose ourselves to criticism. And so I'm really happy to be here and hear everyone's thoughts and insights.
Thanks, Dion. Lynn Conners from CSD. Lynn, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I am Lynn Conners. I have been a part of the clinical faculty in CSD here at Emerson for about 20 years. I currently have the tremendous pleasure of being the director of the Robbins Speech, Language, and Hearing Center. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you about how failure manifests and fear of failure manifests itself in the clinical setting, and how climbing out of our comfort zones leads to sort of incredible magic. So welcome, glad to spend some time with all of you.
Thanks, Lynn. And our fearless leader, Dr. Brent Smith of Marketing Communications. Hi, Brent.
Hello, Luann. Hello, everyone. My name is Brent Smith. So I'm the chairperson of the Department of Marketing and Communication, also a professor. Prior to Emerson, I was at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia for about 14 years, been in higher ed for about 20, about as many years in business as well. So I'd like to say that I'm very well practiced at failure, though I'm still perfecting my skill at it. So I hope to share just a few insights of what I've learned along my journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Let's see, I think that's all of us. I don't see Wes here, so let's keep going. So Paul, with Paul's help, I thought we'd start off with just a little bit of poll with the participants' assistance. So I want to ask you, have you ever failed at something you really cared about? Are you afraid of failing in the future? Those are the two questions I'd like us all to see where the audience stands on these. Okay, So have you ever failed at something you really cared about? 93%. And that didn't count us voting. So I raised my hand. Yes. Are you afraid of failing in the future? 84%, 16% no. Okay, well, thank you, Paul, for doing that. So when thinking about this panel, there were a lot of things to think about, but I know there are a lot of students here. So I want to share a few instances of famous people who have shared that they have failed. So if you will allow me, this won't take long, but it kind of sets the tone for some of I call these spectacular failures, right? So these are some of my favorite stories that I share with my students. And I think you know about some of their failures. So Serena Williams, I don't like to lose at anything. Nobody does. Yet I've grown most not from the victory, she says, but from setbacks. And she calls a champion defined not by their wins, but how they recover when they fall. Amy Poehler, very funny lady, who admits to failing millions of times on stage. Now, I've never been on stage, so I think that kind of failure would really scare me. But she says she's pitched ideas and let other people change them, knowing that it was the wrong choice, but let them do it anyway. The question is to ask yourself, how do you want to fail? Do you want to fail in a way that feels like it respects your taste and your value system? Steven Spielberg, I don't know if you know this. It's pretty interesting. His movies have made lots of money, 3 Academy Awards. Yet he failed twice to get into the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts. Right? And much later, the school, in sort of an oops, we got that one wrong, built a building in honor of Spielberg and granted him an honorary degree. I thought that was very interesting. Mira Wang, amazing designer, wedding dresses. She dreamed, I did not know this, she dreamed of being a figure skater, but didn't make the cut. Instead, she landed one of her first jobs at Vogue in New York, a fashion editor at Vogue for 15 years. And one of her quotes is, when you fall down, what you have to do as a skater, you pick yourself up. It's not about failure. It's about how much you love what you do. So these are just some perspectives. And this is one of my favorites because she started in TV news like Janet and I did. And she got fired at WJZ in Baltimore. She says, there's no such thing as failure. It's just life trying to move us in a different direction. Elizabeth Arden, did you know she dropped out of nursing school? The first business that she launched failed, but she didn't give up. She borrowed a whopping $6,000 to start her next beauty company, which, as we know it, is Elizabeth Arden, big time. And Guy Kawasaki, in the late 90s, he turned down a job offer to be CEO at Yahoo. That was when Yahoo was big. He says that was a $2 to $3 billion mistake. Then he landed at Apple, and many people credit Kawasaki for Mac's popularity, marketing, creating the cult of Apple as we know it today. And he says, good entrepreneurs stumble and try again. It's a success by a different measure. And one of my favorites, Lady Gaga, she was dropped from Island Def Jam Records after only 3 months. That was way back in 2006. And she tells this story about her grandmother saying to her, I'm going to let you cry for the rest of the day, and then you have to stop crying and have to go kick some ass. The rest is history, right? So thank you for letting me share those little moments from famous people and famous failures. So I think we should share some of our experience. Dion, would you kick us off sort of talking about, there's the psychology of failure, you know, there's the anticipation of failure. And in society, and certainly in academics, students are very aware of what an F means in a class, right?
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to kick off the discussion. So as I said at the beginning, my background is largely in debate and in critical race theory and that sort of thing. So I was glad that I was asked because forced me to reflect on my career as a debater and as a coach. And just so people know, a lot of times in debate, you know immediately after the round if you've won or lost. Like the judge tells you straight up right then and there. And I started debating at 13. So imagine like a 13-year-old is debating and then a judge tells you this is why you lost and this is what you did wrong. So a couple of insights, or I'll give kind of 3 key takeaways because I don't want to overspeak or take up too much time. So my experience in coaching and doing consulting work has kind of been 3 key things when it comes to implications or takeaways regarding to failure. The first thing I always tell people, my students, is growth isn't like perfectly linear, right? So oftentimes we have this idea that as we grow, that it's a constant incline, right? That is not the case. And so let me give you an example. Let's say I take a student to a debate tournament and the judge says to them, okay, I think you need a stronger rebuttal, right? And they do that stronger rebuttal that next round, but the third round, it digresses. To me, that is not a failure. That is still growth because you have proven that you can do it. Then it just becomes a consistency issue, right? But I think that's a language change. If you've done it once, then you should figure out how you can do it again and create a formula for consistency. So always remember that there may be times that you're growing that you fall off, but that doesn't mean that that's a failure. That just means you maybe have to adjust, right? Second thing is an implication from my work when I do race trainings and equity initiatives and consulting and that sort of thing, is that I think a lot of times when we fear failure, I think that's because we're focused on perfection. And so I tell people all the time, my go-to phrase is we should be focusing on progress, not perfection, because if you focus on perfection, you will almost never get there. And you should always be able to applaud yourself for the growth, right? Because going from a 0 to a 1 is still important, right? And I tell, again, when we do debate and that sort of thing, if you assume opinions are on a number line, and -10 is the strongest negative opinion, and 10 is the strongest positive opinion, the mistake that we often make is assuming that someone has to do a complete 180 of that opinion in order for it to be success. But that's not true, right? Success can be incremental, success can be gradual, and we just have to accept that and learn that. And then the third thing, which I think is the most important for me and what I have learned in debate, is fail forward. And I say that in a couple of ways, right? So after this quote unquote failure, right? First of all, I would ask you to assess what that actually means. And I think this can be done by asking yourself 2 key questions in terms of if it's a failure. First is there an opportunity for growth, right? So what did I learn from this failure, right? Or from this negative experience? The second thing is, what was in my control, right? I think a lot of times we are obsessed with failure because we are obsessed with the things that we can't control, where we should be focused on the things that we can. So you should figure out what you can control, focus on those things, maximizing your engagement with those things. And the things that you can't control, manage the expectations. And I'll leave with an example. When I say manage expectations, let's say you're doing a startup, right? And you launch a campaign and your campaign goal is 50,000, but you only get 42,000, right? And you leave and you say that that's a failure. To me, that would mean that you should have a different expectation and acknowledge that that's still more than you had at the beginning. So I would say when we talk about failure, as we talk about these conversations for the next 30 minutes, really think about, is it a failure or is it I should reflect and manage my expectations of what is happening. And then I'll throw it to the next person.
Dion, I think those are really, really helpful insights because it's your measure of success, right? I think that's the underlying message in what you're saying. It's your measure of success, not something self-imposed by somebody else. Janet.
First failure of the day. I forgot to unmute. All right, here we go. Welcome to, I'm going to quote from Gina Gale, who basically described fail as the first attempt in learning. And I will begin and end. Welcome to the journalistic storytelling. You begin and end and tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. But I talk about in journalism, there are a million ways in which we basically think we're failing when we think, one, we can't, going back to Deion, the perfect story. If I just get the lead right, if I just get this one more interview, if I just do, it will be perfect. And the reality is that there is never enough time. There are always way too many people, and there's always way too many ways that you can write something. And so part of the first thing I like in terms of how to deal with failure is to say, you didn't fail if you did the work. If you got the story, it may not be perfect, but you didn't fail. Even if you got the story, and here it is, because this is another way we track failure in journalism, it doesn't get published, it doesn't air, it doesn't see the light of day because you've had a manager simply say, you don't have it. Well, I think I've got it. Well, you don't have it. All right. So then what do I do with that? I'm going to have it. I'm going to figure out how to have it. Right. And so it's that first attempt at learning. All right. So I didn't get it published. I didn't get it aired, but can I make it better? And part of it is not making it better for you. This is the thing about journalism. Am I making it better for the people that I think have a need for this story? So then another sign of failure in journalism, we like to say, is when the response is crickets. Nobody does diddly squat about you say, I failed. Nobody. No. It's a good story. It's out there, but the response is, who knows? So then the question is, what do you learn in relationship to, I got no response? Well, then what is the lesson from that? How do you, is it really, you put a lot of your stuff in it, but not necessarily thinking about how others might get at it? How might be the response? The other side of that coin in journalism is not only did you get a response, but you got condemnation all around the block. Somebody's basically telling you everything you've done is the worst thing. You should have never done it, blah, 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 blah. Okay. In each of those instances, what can you learn if it's that, what in terms of the second attempt, which Gina refers to as SAIL, second attempt in learning. And so what can you learn from each of those that in essence, you can basically make the story and a better way for people to find out what's going on. And quite honestly, this is why I love journalism so much, is that if it can happen, you can make a change, particularly in television, in something as quick as a minute, 20 seconds. There are myriad ways in which you can fail, but then you can get back up, going back to Serena's quote and going back to Vera Wang's quote, get back up and you can make it better. And that's all that matters. And quite honestly, that truly is it in journalism, day in and day out, making it better.
Thanks, Janet. Brent, what do you think?
All right. Thank you, Anne. So I've got just a few things. I'll try to be kind of to the point. So I will call these Brents Sense. Sorry for the alliteration if that annoys you. As having been an athlete and a musician and also leader of a few different teams, that this is my lens for what I'm going to share with you. I think about failure as an opportunity to recognize and develop team chemistry. So we heard earlier during Com Day about storytelling, right? So I like to think that every group, every team has its story, and it's going to have its story. It's going to co-create its story about failure and what it's going to mean. So failure, just like success, is ours. So moving beyond just thinking about individual failure, let's kind of consider how we look at the failure of any member of our team. and we have some equity in it, how we prepare them, how we help them through it, how we help them out of it, and how we kind of cultivate opportunities for people to be able to share with us the vulnerability they experience as they make mistakes, as they fail. We know that people, when they draw anger for the mistakes they make, they hide them. And that means they don't show us who they are. They don't try. We don't realize much success. So I would say, really, let's think about ourselves as characters who face different challenges. One of us, all of us. We're going to make choices, and then we will, as a result, see some kind of change. It's always more than just the instance of what the failure might seem to be. It's a reflection of who and what we were when that failure happened and what we are going to learn from it going forward. Another kind of lesson, getting through the finish line. So, in my track days, I remember, I won a lot of races. I probably lost a lot more. One of the races I hated running was hurdles. Loved doing 100-meter. My track coach said, "Hey, Smith, why don't you try those hurdles?" And I'm like, oh. So I say this, rather than have a fixed mindset, just keep trying the things that you know you're good at. Have a little courage, trust yourself enough that you can get through failure. If you can't jump the hurdles, hit the hurdles, but finish the race. So don't run to the finish line, run through the finish line. And just like you've seen on the news every once in a while, where someone can't quite finish the race by themselves, when you see somebody who can't quite get there by themselves, don't you let them fail, because that's your failure also. You go out there and you help them put their arm around your shoulder and you walk them through the finish line because you understand what they're trying to do. So when we see people trying to succeed, let's not let them fall short. Let's kind of get them through the finish line. Last thing I've got is an acronym that was shared with me, and I love Gail's earlier first attempt in learning and second attempt in learning. So I'm totally going to steal that as often as I can. I'm going to sample that like crazy, like in my early hip hop production days. So I have one that I learned as a kid. It's FEAR, false evidence appearing real. And I go back to, this idea that failure sometimes can make us so uncomfortable we're afraid of it, when really, as Dion has cited, it gives us an opportunity to recognize how we have progressed. So where perfection, it might be a reflection of what we didn't really understand about what the goal should have been. Maybe if we just make it a little further than where we were when we started, that alone is success. So we want to trust ourselves. And for the students out there, as you do team assignments, trust yourself and trust your team with some vulnerability, okay? And also allow them to make mistakes. Have no punishments for them. Just, let's say, how are we going to get through this? A different sense of equity gets you a different sense of profit for everyone. And that's all I got, my 3 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. And Lynn, I bet you have a different perspective.
I do, but it builds so beautifully on all the things that came before. I just want to share a little bit how fear of failure manifests in clinical work and in research. We see really rigid adherence to the plan is sort of the manifestation of fear of failure. It has to go the way I scripted it. And if it doesn't, I can't go there, right? And now, believe me, a well-executed plan can be a thing of beauty. But if you create space with flexibility for other, be it client or peer or mentee or whoever it may be, that combination of your plan and their contributions to you is frightening because it's unknown and it's unscripted. But that's where the growth comes, right? That's where the development, the magic, right? In our clinical work and our research, we talk about combining what's the science, what do we know, and where's the art, where's the flexibility, where's the combinations of those two things. And when we make space for that, when we get out of our way of fear of failure, we create room for some of that to happen. Being afraid of not knowing enough, right? It's the other place that fear of failure shows up, is this, I don't know enough about this to take it on. And so there's avoidance that happens. But finding space to reframe, I've got enough to go for it, can create all of these wonderful opportunities for growth. It's not easy, right? Getting over those hurdles, they hurt when you hit them, and it's, but you'll remember. I think I want to close by sharing my mentor's words that I think about so often, David Luderman, the idea of the first time that you do something, it's never a failure. It's always data. Always information. I'm going to use this to make decisions about my next steps. So I do feel like our themes, though they fall into different segments of our professions, really do echo one another. So love hearing all of these ideas and tips and bringing them together. Thanks so much.
Oh, that's great. I want to tell two stories. So when I was a cub reporter in Green Bay, Wisconsin, I was a one-man band. So what that meant way back then was I was the reporter and I was also the videographer, the photojournalist. And so back in those days, Janet will remember this, we had like 20-pound cameras on a tripod. They're not like the cameras are today. And so I needed to interview the sheriff in a county where a crime had been committed. So I went into his office, plopped the 20-pound camera on a tripod, apparently didn't lock it down really well, started my interview, and I'm focused, my head is focused on content, like the questions. I want to get answers to the questions. And I didn't see during the time of the interview, the camera drifting over away from pointing at the sheriff. I didn't even notice it because I'm so focused on the questions. So I get back to the station. This is back in the day of videotape. Get back to the station, pop in the cassette tape, and there's a lovely tight shot of the sheriff's ear, which was a complete disaster for me as a cub reporter. So I mean, I can't use any of that on the air, right? And so that obviously much later in life, I remembered all of the details of that horrific failure. So it made a mark on me. Then fast forward, some of my entrepreneurial students have heard me tell this story. My first company, I had a co-founder, and we were fortunate enough to get investors to the tune of $1 million to launch an online media company, producing stories with video, because that's what we did, what we knew best. And so about 3 years, 3.5, 4 years into that, the investors wanted to take the company in a different direction than what the founders. This is not an unusual story among entrepreneurs, but what I failed to do was to have an exit strategy built into the contract with the investors. Didn't know. Nothing was in the contract about that. So what do? My co-founder and myself had to buy out the investors. So that was a failure that was very painful, costly, painful in order to do that. But we did, and we got over it. We made that hurdle. We paid them back a certain percentage of what they had invested so that we could move the company in the direction that we wanted to. So what I tell my students is that nobody sets out to fail. Things happen. And it's all about how you pick yourself up, how you handle it, how you don't beat yourself up about it. I know I won't make those two mistakes ever again in my whole life. But I think it's something that you learn over time, and Brent said it best, so not being afraid of taking that risk sometimes is the biggest leap that you'll take, but do it. I mean, if you fail, it's okay. Most of us survive it, really. do we want to open it up to any questions now? Does anybody else want to add to the stories? There are lots of stories. We could be here all day telling stories, but maybe we could open it up to the audience and see if they have any questions. I love to hear questions from students. Well, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to.
Luann, I'll just sort of
Yeah,
add a
go
little
ahead.
bit. Every single time as a journalist, when you're trying to go out and start something, there's that it's stuck in your throat, right? That tension. And I think it's all that's where the fear comes into you. But the other side, but the reality is then let's think about what is the calculated risk that by making the calculations, taking that risk, it opens up, quite honestly, which is the adrenaline, the excitement, the fun of having taken that risk. Ladies and gentlemen, I will never bungee jump. I applaud all of those who have made that particularly calculated risk. One I have calculated, not for me. But again, for anyone who's ever done that will tell you when it succeeds, it's all the greater the rush of knowing of that success. All you got to do, I go back to that picture of Serena, because man, Serena, when she smashes something and knows it, it is this incredible rush. And so you can't get that unless you take the chance. You take the calculated risk.
And I see questions in the chat, but I wanted to say two quick things because this is something that I wish that I had been told in my 20s. One, your 20s are going to be trial and error. You are going to face barriers. You are going to quote unquote fail. That's okay. You may not land the job that you exactly want right out of undergrad. All of these things, I would encourage you all to focus on learning and growth and don't expect perfection. The second thing I will say before we get to the questions is, don't compare your chapter 13 or someone else's chapter 13 to your chapter 3, right? A lot of failure happens when we see what other people are doing. But as we have all kind of discussed, failure and success are going to be determined at the individual level. And that goes back to the idea of managing the expectations that I was talking about. That person may have more support. That person may have more resources. You know, there are other factors that may be contributing to that than just your individual talent. So I would really encourage everyone, and I know it's hard, but get to the point where you are kind of feel so confident in what you do that you say, you know, that person is great, but I'm also confident in what I have to offer as well.
Yeah. May I chime in some? Deion, this inspired me some. You know, I remember, I don't know, I think Denzel Washington is not the first person to say this, but at a commencement speech in Philly one time, essentially said, if you're not failing, it's because you're not trying hard enough, right? And I think, you know, that there's something to be said for, in a people-to-people kind of way, people who try have their own gravity. They're attractive to other people. They say, you just tried and you failed. It's a bit inspirational in an odd kind of way, right? Give it a try. And I recall, you know, a good friend of mine from Taiwan, years ago, we said to ourselves, this doesn't fit everybody, but we said we did not want to be like 85, 95 years old and say, I wish I would have. When I knew I could have. You know, and to Deion's point, when you're in your 20s, you got a lot of time. You have a lot of, as Carol Ferrara said this morning, we are very resilient as human beings. You can get over failure. Luann said it. We could talk about failures like all year long and still not be done. So we are a testament to the fact that you can make it through, you know, but, you know, just think about that. Don't say, I wish I would have what I knew I could have.
So I want to answer one of these questions because it happened to me. This person is asking, do you have any advice in facing families, discouragement, and chasing your dreams and the constant feedback about your failure? How do you change your mindset for success? So I'll tell you a really quick story. My dad was a general surgeon. He went to medical school, spent a lot of time in school and practiced medicine. He wanted me desperately to go to medical school. So that's where I started at Tulane University in New Orleans. Brent and I share a love of Louisiana food and music. After about a year and a half, I knew that I didn't want to become a doctor. But I also knew that that was going to break my father's heart. So, getting up enough nerve to tell him this was I went to college at 17, so I was about 18, a little over 18, told him this. I knew he was terribly disappointed because I wanted to be an English major and a history minor. So he would ask me all sorts of questions about, well, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to get a job? Parents say these things, right? How are you going to, if you study film, how are you going to get a job? If you study marketing, how does that impact your livelihood? So that impacted me a great deal for a while, but inside, I knew that I wanted to be a writer, a journalist. I knew that was where I felt comfortable. And that's what I pursued. And much later in life, my dad and I had a great conversation about that. And he wasn't as heartbroken as I thought he was. So I don't know if that gives you any insights, but hopefully it does. There are a couple other questions. Lynn, would you like to take one of these questions? Let's see, what if I'm okay with falling down and getting back up and doing better, but others may not have the same tolerance for my failures and lose patience with me. Any advice?
Wondering about reframing that a little bit to that idea of being inspiring. By getting up again, right? That idea of modeling perseverance, right? And sort of reframe for yourself some of those definitions, if you can, about expectations, right? And there's some really inspiring words that you can pick instead of disappointing, right?
And I will try, as a coach, students make many mistakes repeatedly. So I think I can give some insight on this. And as someone who frequently encounters mistakes repeatedly and sometimes the same mistakes, I would encourage you to ask that person, and I say this a lot, ask that person, how would you want me to support you when you fail? And that is what I would like from you, right? And I use this all the time to ask people, okay, what would you recommend or what would you do in my situation? And a lot of times when you kind of give people that ability to put a mirror in front of them and to self-reflect, oftentimes that self-reflection will help them say, you know what? I'm sorry. And sometimes from friends too, it comes from a good place of like passion, right? It's like, oh, I know you wanted that so bad and that sort of thing. So if it's like not malice or ill will, I would just be transparent and, like Brent said, vulnerable, and just say, this moment I would need support. Like, so what would you, the friend that you would want me to be in this moment, can you be that for me? And that same thing with family. I think it works both ways.
And instructors, yeah, right. I mean, reach out to your educators if you're feeling like those are the folks too that you're worrying about. Those kinds of conversations and reflections can be tremendously growthful.
I haven't seen Luann. I haven't seen any question or.
You hit your mute button, Brent.
I say we didn't bring this up yet, but I think it's important to try a few things that you're really going to be bad at. Like find a game, a sport where you're like, you know what? Like Dion said, progress. right? I expect I'm going to be pretty bad at this, but you get comfortable with, okay, I don't really have to do everything well. And then, people learn how you handle that, and maybe that's what helps them give the advice that Dion has mentioned, Here's how I got over some of my feelings as they relate to failure.
That's a great point, Brent, because now after you do that a few times, you understand how you feel, right? And so it can be, I don't want to say a comfortable feeling, but you get used to it. So it's not such a shock to the system the first time. So I think that's a really good point.
And I like to, when I first started teaching, my sister was a college professor. And so one of the things she always told me is basically, believe it or not, this is another rule of threes, which was like the first time you teach, you're going to make mistakes. The second time you teach, you're going to make all these adjustments to deal with all those mistakes. And the third time, you're finally going to figure out where you may overcompensated, all that, and you're going to go and really work on that. And quite honestly, I sort of keep trying to remind myself of that first time, second time, third time. It's great if it happens the second time, but if it doesn't, third time, okay.
Good point. I'd like to ask Dean Rice if he would like to say a few words. Raul?
Thank you so much. This has been great. It's been an amazing way to end the day today. I learned a lot, and thank you for your contributions and stories. And I just would like to thank everyone who participated in the panels and workshops today, including so many of our students. I had the opportunity of watching at least part of each event this afternoon, including this concluding event. Well, I was here for the whole thing, and I was amazed by the quality of the conversations throughout the day. So my biggest takeaway, if I can have a takeaway, is let's not forget everything that we have gone through this past year and everything that we have learned. Let's reflect on it. Let's learn from it and use these newly found skills and newly found strength to build a better future. I think that's kind of the message that I heard throughout the day, since the beginning, since the opening panel. This has been challenging, but it also has taught us to look at life in a different way, to enjoy our daily lives, enjoy the people in our lives, our connections to each other and to community, and to take advantage of some of the openness that became available to us, or a different way when we think about everything that happened this past year, a different way of looking at life. So that would be kind of my concluding thoughts. I think communication plays an amazing role and will play an amazing role in the future in terms of how we connect to each other, how we solve problems, how we use technology, how we keep our empathy, how we listen, how we talk to each other and relate to each other. So I'm really, really pleased with the quality of the conversations and the fact that everybody volunteered their time and we're here all day participating. So thank you to all of you, the panelists in the last panel about the fear of failure. Thank you for sharing and be vulnerable and sharing your examples and experiences. And thank you to everyone who participated. I don't want to have the last word if anybody else wants to say anything.
I'm actually responding to one of the questions about, hey, I've tried to go for this internship, I haven't gotten it. Do I keep going it? And here's what I'm going to tell you. You're going to get the job, you're going to get the internship that fits you. And maybe this isn't fitting you. Don't limit yourself, but be open to something that may not necessarily fit it's not the top New York Times and the Washington Post or NBC. It doesn't matter. Get an internship that fits what you, and you will feel that. Many a newspaper interview, I felt it where this was not going to work for me. And much as I love the idea of being at that highfalutin place, it wasn't right. Right. So my suggestion to you is you'll find that one that fits you. Don't give up. Keep going for it.
Good last words, Janet. I want to thank my colleagues. I enjoyed your stories. Lynn, Dion, Brent, Janet, Raul, thank you so much. And special thanks to everybody behind the scenes for making this a great panel. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week.